as you know, the coronavirus has been wreaking havoc in the US, not only on the health systems, but also on the economy. There's just on Friday, it was reported that there was 3.3 million that just signed up for unemployment just in the previous week. So that's a staggering number. It's the highest since the Great Depression. So yeah, pretty significant fallout as a result of the coronavirus and all of these kind of stay home orders today. I'm going to be breaking up the video into bite-sized pieces, but I'll also record it in full. So if you want to listen through all the pieces, you can definitely do that, or you can hone in for your convenience on the ones that are going to be most relevant to your situation. But why was the CARES Act passed? So I mentioned the economy, but what it makes me think of visually is, if you've ever seen Spider-Man, one of the common things that happens is he has two things going on at the same time. There's a train that's about to run off a bridge, and so what he does, he goes, saves it, shoots it with the spider web, and he kind of suspends it. That's what the CARES Act is trying to do. So the government stepped in, and obviously it's not fixing everything immediately, but what it did do is it stopped the U.S. economy from just kind of free falling. And right now we're kind of being suspended with the CARES Act and some of these benefits that have been put forward. Obviously, there's still other things going on. So the Green Goblin's flying around. He's the one that caused that train. He kind of set that trap for Spider-Man to have to deal with. But the Green Goblin's still out there wreaking havoc. And basically that's the equivalent of what the coronavirus is. So that hasn't been solved. So with that, we can dive into the financial topic. So there's really three big pieces. So it's going to be whether or not you're going to get a check, what unemployment would look like if you ended up needing to use that, and then also student loan impact and some of the features there. So again, you can watch these separately. I do want to encourage you to make sure you're following or subscribing, whether it's on social media or my email newsletter, because these things are subject to change. Speaking of the student loan aspect, that has already changed a few times just in the last few weeks. And so you want to stay up to date on this, make sure that nothing's changed or tweaked as we move along. And then also there's could be the potential for new information to be coming out. Are you getting a check? So basically what is going to happen is the US passed this bill, and it's going to be refunding credits for 2020 taxes, which is interesting because if you think about it, normally you get a refund of your tax credits when you file the taxes the next spring, basically. So right now for 2020, when we're filing taxes, we're filing for 2019. So the credits for 2019, you're getting those now. And with how it works with the check and the stimulus check that you're going to be receiving is the U.S. government said, you know what, we're going to send this out to you first, and then you're just not going to get it back when it comes to tax season. It's going to be reported there, and it'll be pretty straightforward as far as how to take care of that. The benefit that you receive from the stimulus checks is going to be $1,200 per individual, or if you're married filing jointly, it's $2,400. But it's very important to know whether or not you're going to get a check in the first place. So there's going to be individuals that are not going to receive it. The first, most obvious one is going to be anyone that's older than 17 years old and is claimed by somebody else. So if that happens to be you, or if you have a child that you claim, but they're older than 17, that's going to kind of produce some unique aspects where they're not going to be accounted for in terms of the stimulus checks in any form or fashion. Then the other one is going to be if your adjusted gross income is higher than a certain threshold. So the adjusted gross income, that's basically just a unique way that the IRS and tax system works, where you have your normal income that you receive, but then there's things that you can do that can reduce that. So you can reduce it with your 401k, you can reduce it with IRA contributions. There's a whole bunch of different things that could bring down your AGI to try to qualify. It makes the most sense if you're just kind of just barely over, but once you cross these thresholds, then it starts being reduced down little by little. So basically, the benefit from the stimulus check is going to be reduced $5 for every $100 you're over the limits. And for a single individual, it's $75,000 in adjusted gross income. And then for married filing jointly, it's $150,000. And so again, if you cross that phase out limit, then that's when these kind of numbers start to kick in, where it's going to be reduced $5 for every $100 that you go over those limits. Another unique thing that you want to be aware of is you actually get $500 additional per child under 17 that you claim. There are limitations though. So if you're a single filer and you have children, you're limited up to 2 children that are going to count for that. So you're limited to $1,000 for your children, basically. If you are married filing jointly, they increase that to 4 children. And so basically 2,000 is going to be the cap on that additional amount. So the benefit that you receive from the stimulus checks is going to be 1,200 per individual, or if you're married filing jointly, it's 2,400. And then you tack these child credits on top of that, basically. So that's how that works. I think another big question that everyone's asking now, so maybe you're already familiar with whether or not you're going to get those checks and what they're going to look like dollar-wise, but another big question is when are we actually going to expect these checks and how are they going to come? So the IRS is going to use the forms that are on file from your previous return. So if you did direct deposit, they're going to be using that information. It's also important to know too that if you haven't filed 2019 yet, they're going to be looking at 2018. Normally that's not going to be an issue, but if for some reason you had substantially larger income where you're over that AGI limit, that could cause some unique things to occur with your taxes and with that credit. So you might not receive the credit if you're too far above that AGI, looking at that most previous tax return. And that could be a reason to either speed up filing for your taxes for 2019, or maybe slowing it down too if you feel that that's going to cause some issues with those phase out limitations. And then also too, if you just had a child in 2019, that would be a reason to speed up your filing for your taxes to make sure they get counted. It sounds like you might have a couple weeks because as far as when you may receive these, it's going to take a while. It's not easy to kind of pump out checks and direct deposits for millions and millions of people. And so it could be anywhere from 3 weeks to a month and a half, possibly. So obviously that's not a great thing. You wish that this was going to hit your bank account right away, especially if you've already been impacted by some of the fallout on the economy and maybe you lost your job or had hours reduced, something like that. So good news is that this is official though, it is law. So you're going to get it. It's just going to be a matter of time before all this stuff kind of gets processed on the IRS and the government side to make sure you get those. So I think another thing that's important is, well, once you get these checks, what's the best thing you should do with it? Because obviously that the government's doing this for a reason. They're seeing that there could be a lot of potential stress on people, and these checks are not specified to only go to unemployed individuals. So that's one interesting thing to be aware of. And it's because they feel that everyone's going to face some unique situation. And obviously a lot of us are forced in our homes. So that's already causing some unique disruption in our lives. So part of it is to do with that. But then also part of it is, well, just because you have your job today doesn't mean that's guaranteed or that it's always going to look the same in the next couple months. So this is something just to kind of help everyone that kind of fits within those thresholds to navigate that with a little bit more help, basically, is what that looks like. And so the first thing I'd say is don't waste it. You might be thinking that, well, I think my job should be pretty good. Like I don't work and travel, I should be good. But that's not the case necessarily. There's been a lot of fallout because as spending decreases, as layoffs start to occur, that has a butterfly effect on just every aspect of the economy, basically. So you, just because your job and position may be something totally unrelated to the things that are most related to the coronavirus, there's just a lot of fallout with a lot of people staying home and a lot of people being unemployed and not being able to spend dollars here and there. And so that just has a huge kind of ripple effect, basically. So don't waste it on things that don't matter. The very first line of defense is always going to be your emergency savings. So should something hit the fan, maybe you've already found yourself in this position, you definitely want to focus on emergency savings. What I kind of like to think of is 3 months is a good emergency savings. 6 months is a great emergency savings. And then after that, it's kind of up to your discretion. Is there something else you could do better with those funds other than just kind of continue to pile on? Or would you feel more comfortable if something happened, if you actually had a little bit more in 6 months? So you can kind of use your discretion there. Also, once you've built up an emergency savings, you can start to look at other things that could be annoyances, could be financial burdens for you, which would be high interest rates. So things like credit cards, or if you have like a private student loan, sometimes those are extremely high, like 10, 12%. So that would be something to look at and consider either knocking out or at least saving that money in cash. And once we make it through kind of this whole coronavirus era, then knock those things out afterwards. Once you know that, oh, we're through it, the economy is bouncing back, I should be good now, then you can just take that amount that you saved and just knock out those things that you wanted to. Another thing that would be good after the high interest debt would be looking at short-term goals. So if you, obviously a lot of people aren't traveling right now, so that's going to help you save a little bit. But also a lot of times people go into credit card debt or some other forms of debt in order to make travel happen. So this could be something that if you've already had the emergency savings, you don't have any high interest debt, well, this is going to help you fund those kind of short-term expenses without having to worry about stretching yourself too thin. And then last thing would be, if this money really can go towards long-term, you got those other kind of boxes checked, then long-term investments definitely a good opportunity to think about. I actually recorded a much more lengthier video just specific to that. Should you be investing right now? It goes through some of these steps a little bit more in depth. So feel free to look through my timeline or review my website and check that out. So the next big thing, I think this one's the most important by far, is the unemployment on steroids. So hopefully not everyone listening to this video has to rely on this, but there's a good chance that some of you will, even greater chance that you're going to at least know people that are in this window where, yep, unemployment's a real thing that people are having to struggle with and deal with. The unique thing about this unemployment on steroids, it actually is reflective of what they're doing to unemployment. In some cases, they're doubling the payment that you'd receive. And so this is what they're doing. Normally, when you file for unemployment, you have to wait a week before you start receiving a paycheck. The government said, nope, we're not going to make people do that during this time period. So they're actually going to cover that first week that normally you wouldn't receive anything. They'll cover that in full, plus you'll get $600 a week on top of what your normal unemployment would provide. Unemployment is a state benefit, and so every state varies a little bit. For example, the Colorado weekly maximum is $618. And so with that being the case, with the $600 on top of that, basically is how that breaks out. So it's going to help tremendously just because it is a big boost. You wouldn't have had the $600 and you would have that first full week with nothing. So that's great that this is going to help those people and individuals pretty quickly, then provide at least a reasonable amount of income. If it protects all of your income, then that's a huge relief. I know there's a lot of people sometimes that have larger earnings per month, but they're not able to build up the emergency savings that they would have preferred to before running into this unique period. But it's still going to help. So there might be a gap for some of the high earners listening to this that, yeah, well, if you're used to making $6,000, there's going to be a gap there. Definitely look at the numbers, make sure that you're doing everything you can to just be efficient until you get back on your feet as far as employment goes. One other huge benefit is they're actually extending this an additional 13 weeks. So traditionally unemployment lasts about 26 weeks as far as the maximum goes. And so obviously if you get employed, then you turn it off. But it was limited to 26 weeks. Now they're adding 13 weeks onto it. So that's important to be aware of. So the last main piece of the CARES Act that I want to share with you today is the student loan aspect. It's pretty unique. Between now and September 30th, 2020, you're actually not going to be paying any interest. So no interest is going to accrue on your federal student loans. If you have private student loans, none of what I'm about to talk about applies to those. And sometimes you have both. Sometimes you have your federal student loans and your private student loans that, again, private student loans don't fall under this, but anyone that has those federal student loans, this does apply to. So you're not going to be paying any interest. No interest is going to be accruing between now and September 30th of 2020. And then another awesome feature is the forbearance aspects. Basically what you can do is there's a special forbearance now that you can go in and request, and that will allow you to skip payments between now and September 30th, 2020 without any penalty, without any interest. And really it's essentially hitting the pause button with no ill effects, no downside at all. Initially, when they announced this, it was before the CARES Act actually was in place, and it wasn't until September 30th. They only gave you a 60-day window. So I was telling clients that 60 days, it might be worth it to kind of put this in a savings, pad your emergency savings over the next 2 months that you get to skip. But obviously, you have to act and just request the forbearance. And so it's not necessarily fun to go in, request something for a 2-month time period, and then go and turn it back on, which is what you had to do by the time September 30th rolls around. And so I wasn't strongly encouraging my clients, but I was saying, yeah, this is probably a good opportunity to build up your emergency savings just in case anything happens employment-wise over the coming months. Now that this has been stretched so far to well over 60 days, it makes a lot more sense because you're going to be able to pad your emergency savings quite a bit. And that's what I'm recommending now, that, yep, it's worth the little bit of hassle to go request it. And then once September 30th rolls around, go in and reestablish your automatic payments, because why not? There's no downside to it. If you're wondering, like, why wouldn't I just make the payments? Because if you did make the payments, it actually does help you a little bit faster, but it doesn't really matter if you make the payments every single month or if you just let this sit in a savings account. So how much you'd be paying towards this, just put it in a savings account just in case. And by the time September 30th rolls around, you can actually just apply all those payments you would have anyways September 30th, and it would have the same effect of you just making those payments every month. So it gives you the flexibility of waiting and seeing how things occur. And then you could just pay it all in full at that point, all those monthly savings that have built up. And no harm, no foul. You still pay it off a little bit faster than you would have otherwise, because you're making a principal payment at that point, and then you're turning on your normal payments to make the normal principal and interest payments. So I know there's a lot of interesting things to be coming up in the future, so definitely stay tuned. I'm gonna try to always stress myself to make sure I'm making content that is easily accessible and available to anyone, even if you're not a client, because I truly believe that financial confidence is a way to just kind of help you live a better life. And so reach out anytime if you think I could add additional value for you.